Hello aspirants, I welcome you all to daily newspaper analysis of Shankar IAS Academy. Today's date is 1st of March 2025. Since the month of March has been started, it reminds us to speed up our process for preliminary preparation, and that is why we have brought you the pre-fit program for 2025 prelims. It is starting on March 10th and you can register the link provided in the description below. So here you will be having morning and evening batches where we will be giving you a lot of tests that is specifically designed to make you clear this prelims examination. So with this note, let us look into the list of articles that we are going to discuss today. In this first article, we'll be discussing about the basics of GDP. In the second article, we'll be discussing about Aditya L1, basics of it. And in the third article, we'll be discussing about the recent avalanche that is happening currently in Uttarakhand, what is the reason behind it. And in the fourth article, we'll be discussing in detail about the Union Carbide waste. Here the article is actually talking about the Bhopal gas tragedy. So we shall see all the articles from the prelims perspective. Without any delay, let us get into the article discussion. Now look at the article. This article title reads, Trial Incineration of Union Carbide Waste Begins. So the article basically talks about the Bhopal gas tragedy. So after the Bhopal gas tragedy, the hazardous waste is still being there in the Union Carbide factory, and currently they are planning to dispose the particular hazardous waste through incineration safely. So here we have to know about two important things. Firstly, what led to the tragedy, and then we have to discuss about the what is the incineration process and what are all the effects of it. So we shall see them from the prelims perspective. Before that, you have to know about this Union Carbide factory. It is placed in Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh, and it is owned by Union Carbide India Limited, which is actually a subsidiary of Union Carbide Corporation, which is a foreign company. So their main purpose is to manufacture pesticides. To manufacture pesticides, their particular important raw material is this methyl isocyanate. This methyl isocyanate, in short called as MIC, will actually be stored in the underground in tanks. What happened was, due to poor maintenance, water started getting leaking into the tank under which the MIC is stored. So inside the tank, the MIC is actually stored in the liquid form, and when liquid started, especially the water started to get inside, the reaction peaked up and it led to the pressure building up inside the tank. So this led to a very big explosion, exposing literally 40 tons of MIC into the air, and this happened in the midnight of December 2 to 3 of 1984, and this leak led to over 5 lakh exposed. Death tolls is like 5,497. It is only official records, but it is estimated like 20,000 people have been died, and over 1 lakh people even today they are suffering from long-term health issues like respiratory, cancer, blindness, and birth defects. So what are all the aftermaths? They have asked to pay a very huge compensation of rupees $470 million, and currently it is abandoned, and even the hazardous waste is still remaining there. Not only that, it led to even contamination of soil as well as groundwater. So there are a lot of other things like justice and environmental cleanup issues and all, but here we are going to focus only on incineration. There are two different ways of disposing waste. One is incineration and pyroclysis. Incineration is nothing but burning the waste in the presence of oxygen, and pyroclysis is burning the waste without oxygen. This is only the very basic difference between the two. Except that I have given you what are all the important things that you have to remember when it comes to incineration and pyroclysis. You can just go through it. Now moving on, we shall see about the benefits of incineration. So the first thing is it helps us to remove, destroy even the toxic substances, for example the pesticides, medical and chemical waste. Secondly, the volume and the mass reduction is very huge. When you take the waste volume, it reduces until 90%, as well as the mass, it reduces until 70%. That is why it is a very effective means of controlling or safely disposing a particular hazardous waste. Thirdly, it is energy recovery. We can generate even heat and electricity through the process. Fourthly, it reduces landfill overload, and it will help us to save the land. Apart from this, it is a very faster means of disposal, and we can eliminate the waste very immediately. And finally, it is pathogen and toxin destruction, so it even kills the pathogens and hazardous chemicals. Now moving on, there are certain consequences which is positive as well as negative. The first thing is air pollution. Obviously, we are burning it. Ultimately, it will release a lot of dioxins, heavy metals, and toxic gases again into the air. And then we are having high energy consumption. Secondly, it is a very expensive process. Thirdly, it releases a lot of toxin ashes and flue gases required for the treatment. So those kinds of hazardous byproducts is there, and that is greenhouse gas emissions especially. So we are burning, obviously the gases released will also contain the greenhouse gases, which will again trap heat, leading to climate change. And we have a high operational cost, very expensive maintenance and compliance. And finally, it is if that is combustion is not complete, then it will also lead to release of lot of toxins. So these are the facts that you have to remember when it comes to incineration. Now I have a prelims question for you. Which of the gases was primarily responsible for the Bhopal tragedy? Yeah, the correct answer for the question is option D, methyl isocyanide. So with these learned points, now let us move on to the next news article discussion. Now look at this article. Recently, not recently, yesterday, huge avalanche has actually happened in Uttarakhand, and that is why it is in news today. So we shall revise what led to the avalanche from the prelims perspective in this news article discussion. So let's start with what is avalanche, the definition of it. So avalanche is nothing but the rapid flow of snow, ice, or debris. So this occurs when when snowpack becomes unstable, and it is triggered by weight or external factors. So this is a very basic definition for avalanche, and there are certain types of avalanches. So the first type is loose snow. It is fan like shaped and it starts at a point. Secondly, slab. So the it's like a slab type of thing. So it is large snow section breaking, and it is the most dangerous type. And then we have powder snow. It is like high speed mix of air and snow. And we have wet avalanche, which is heavy, unstable due to melting. And even ice avalanche, ice chunks breaks from glaciers. So even that we call it as avalanches. Now moving on, we shall say about the causes of avalanche. Firstly, human activities. So currently a lot of activities like laying roads, or bringing a lot of facilities for tourists. So those kinds of things, or even dam building for hydroelectric power projects. So those kinds of things that are done by our human, or all the causes, or one of the causes for the avalanche. Secondly, very heavy snow. So what happens during very heavy snow is that the layer gets thickening in a very short duration, and when this happens, it will be even more unstable, and then it leads to avalanche. Then any kind of rapid temperature changes as well. So if there is heavy snowfall, and if there is on the next day or in consequent weeks, if there is a very high temperature, then the melting substantially happens, leading to instability and leading to avalanches. Then if there is a steep slope, for example 30 degrees to 45 degrees, if there is very steep slope, then avalanches happen. Then some of the vibrations, like even earthquake and noise, so for those kinds of things also avalanche happens. Now moving on, we shall see about Uttarakhand. See, Uttarakhand is a very beautiful state. It is in North Indian Himalayan state, and the capital city is Dehradun, and it was formed very recently in November 9, 2000. It has 13 districts. Talking about the languages, they speak Hindi, Gaharwali, and Kumayoni, and it has international borders with China, especially Tibet and Nepal. Moving on, talking about Uttarakhand's geography, 86% of the particular state is mountain, and the peak like Nanda Devi and Trishul and Kedarnath is there in Uttarakhand. Important rivers like Ganga, Yamuna, Alaknanda, and Bakridi, all are tributaries of Ganga. You have to remember them. So those kinds of rivers flow here, and very important glaciers like Gangotri, where the Ganga origins, and Pindari and Milam, all these glaciers are there. And talking about the climate, they have plain, subtropical, mid hills, they are cool, and they have high Himalayas, which is extreme temperature. Moving on, we have to see why avalanches happen there. So the first thing is, as I said, the causes of avalanches. All the conditions are there in Uttarakhand. There is climate change, like unpredictable and increasing avalanche frequency. Secondly, very high altitude, like 3000 to 7000 meters are there, and it has a very steep slope, like 30 degree to 45 degrees. Heavy snowfall is there in the recent times, and there is rapid weather fluctuations as well. The western disturbances, it has actually speeded up the process of temperature differences. So this western disturbance, it comes from the Mediterranean Sea, and it provides rainfall to the other states during the Rabi season. Especially, it is very helpful for the wheat cultivation in Punjab and Haryana. And this western disturbance also has an impact when it hits the Himalayan states, and leading to a very huge temperature differences. Apart from this, BRO is border roads organization. They are laying down roads, and for that they are actually cutting down the trees, leading deforestation. This is also leading to instability, and lot of hydropower projects is taking place there. There is increased tourism, and it is actually a seismic tension zone. So it is tectonically active as well. So all these are the reasons why avalanche happened there. Now moving on, we shall see about the avalanche disaster management technique. Firstly, Snow and Avalanche Study Establishment SASE of DRDO. They provide automatic weather stations and remote sensing GIS and seismic sensors. So this gives us early warning so that we will be protected from any kind of sudden avalanche disaster. Then we have Defense Geoinformatics Research Establishment, in short called as DGRE. It is actually an AI driven model which provides early warning. And we have satellite and remote sensing. From ISRO, we have RISAT, Cartosat, INSAT, and SAR. All these provide us data about what is actually happening in the region. And we have drones and UAVs. UAVs or unmanned aerial vehicles, NDRF, ITBP, and BRO. All the organizations, they actually have drones and UAVs to actually monitor the glaciers. Now moving on, I have a question for you. Here, five important things has been given, and you have to find which of the above are causes of avalanches. Correct answer is option D, all the five. So these learned points. Now let us move on to the next news article discussion. Now look at this article. The title of the article reads, Aditya L1 payload captures the first ever image of a solar flare kernel. So the article basically talks about the Aditya L1 mission. From Prelims perspective, let us revise about it. So Aditya L1 is nothing but India's first space-based solar mission. It is developed by ISRO, and the main objective of ISRO when it comes to Aditya L1 is that to study sun's atmosphere, magnetic field, and solar activities. So here the mission or the satellite got this name L1 because it is placed in Lagrange Point 1 L. So here you can see where the Lagrange L1 point is there. For those who don't know what is this Lagrangian point, so when there is two different masses, they have their own attractive power based on their gravitational force. So when it comes to sun and when it comes to earth, at this point the repulsion and attraction will be nullified. So if you are going to place a satellite there, it will be acting like a parking lot, and there you can run the satellite with very minimal fuel consumption, because they will not be attracted by both the sun's gravity as well as earth's gravity. So this is what the Lagrangian points is about. So for earth, it is L1 is closer, and we are placing the satellite in L1, and that is why the satellite has also got the name L1. Aditya, it means sun. Okay, from this itself you can remember what is the objective of the mission and what is the aim of the mission. Now moving on, we shall see about other spacecrafts that has been parked in L1. Solar and heliospheric observation, and we have others like WMAP, Planck, and JWST. So all these spacecrafts belongs to different countries. You can just Google it. Now moving on, we shall see about the mission objective. As I said, they have made this mission specifically to study chromosphere, which is the inner part of the sun, and corona dynamics, which is the outer part. Then physics of a partially ionized plasma, and CME is coronal mass ejections and solar flares. Apart from this, certain observations will be made on the particle and plasma environment, and the coronal heating and their properties, and the plasma characteristics when it comes to coronal loops, and coronal mass ejection development and evolution. See, we are learning about the coronal mass ejections, solar winds, and studying about solar entirely because they will ultimately have an impact on Earth. So, whenever solar winds or solar flares hits us, we have disruption in connectivity and all. So, those kinds of things are there, and that is why we are learning. We are making observations on solar, which is ultimate energy source for Earth. And then it will work on identification of solar eruptive event processes, then magnetic field topography, how magnetic field of the sun actually works, and the solar wind origin, composition and dynamics, everything will be studied. Moving on, talking about the payloads, the 7 scientific instruments are there. They will be studying the photosphere, chromosphere and corona of the sun. And here the continuous observation will be made 24/7, and the detectors include electromagnetic, particle and magnetic field. Capture a real-time solar activity. Now moving on, here certain missions, their objectives, country and year has been given. You can just quickly go through all the things. It might be asked in the preliminary examination. Based on the article, I have a prelims question for you. The Solar Ultraviolet Imaging Telescope SUIT on board Aditya L1 is designed to study. The correct answer for the question is option B, the sun's chromosphere and photosphere in near ultraviolet NUV wavelengths. So with these learned points, now let us move on to the next news article discussion. Now look at this article. Recently, National Statistical Office, in short called as NSO, has released a report, and this report highlights the GDP growth rate in the past year, from October to December 2024. 6.2% of GDP growth has been there. This is huge when we compare to 5.6%. So the article says that our current GDP growth is on the pace and we are doing better. So from the prelims perspective, we have to know about how GDP is calculated, and we shall see about certain schemes relevant to GDP growth. We shall start with what is GDP. GDP is nothing but the total monetary value of final goods and services produced within the geographical boundary of a particular country. So any kind of production that is happening within the country, production in the sense both the service as well as manufacturing happening within the country, then we will be calculating it under GDP. And it has a very specific period. Certain countries, they have quarterly GDP, but we are calculating it for annually. So the formula is C plus I plus G plus X minus M. It is very easy to remember this particular formula. C is like private consumption. So the private consumption to happen, for the private consumption to happen, you need land, labor, entrepreneurship and capital. So these 4 are the factors of production, and it is offered by the private consumption. Secondly, the gross private investment. So investment, when it comes to gross private investment, here they are talking about the individual spending. So any kind of wages, rent or profit or even investment that any private member does. So those calculations will be under this I. Then we have government spending, which is another sector. Government spending, here they are talking about the pensions provided, the salary provided, the subsidies provided under the scheme. So those kinds of things will be added. And finally, import and export. So whatever produced beyond the subsistence of a particular country will be exported, right? So the difference between the export and import is nothing but the X minus M. So whichever is greater will be the first, and that is what we call it as net export. This is very easy thing to remember. Just remember this way. First thing is private consumption, then private consumption, investment, then we have government spending, and then we have export import, difference, which is net export. Now, talking about how GDP is calculated, we have different methods. Firstly, production method. What kind of value is added at every stage of a particular thing being produced? So that is what we call it as production method. Each will be calculated. Secondly, the expenditure method. Expenditure method is what the formula we saw. Any kind of expenditure made on a particular thing, every expenditure will be calculated as a GDP. And finally, the income method, that is the wages, rent, and interest, or the profits that has been got by the persons, those will be calculated under income method. And when it comes to our country, the GDP is calculated by National Statistical Office (NSO), which is under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, in short called as MOPSP. And quarterly and annual release of GDP is happening. The base year is 2011 to 12. Now, talking about the factors that affect GDP growth domestically, the monetary policies like the interest rate and inflation that is happening in the economy, it has a profound impact on GDP. Secondly, the agriculture and industrial outputs. So how agriculture performs due to a particular season, what happens if a monsoon fails, so those kinds of things. And the industrial output, like the manufacturing happening in our country through any means, through domestic or as well as the foreign direct investment, so everything will be calculated. And then the investment and infrastructure. Investment both in the terms of stock as well as in terms of government spending, and the infrastructure that is built. And finally, government policies like taxation and subsidies, the GDP growth will be there. And these are certain domestic factors. Talking about the external factors, any kind of global economic trends. So if there for example, if US is reducing their interest rates, then the pullout will be happening in our economy to invest a lot in US. So what happens is now India is forced to reduce the interest rate similar to USA, and those kinds of economic trends, global economic trends, will have an impact on GDP growth. Secondly, the oil prices, very important thing. So ultimately, whatever production happens, to give it in the hands of consumers, it must be transported, and the final product will include the transportation cost as well. So if the oil price peaks, then the cost of the product that you buy will also be increasing. So the oil prices play a very important role. And finally, the exchange rates between the two countries, so this also will affect the GDP growth. Here are certain government schemes that helps for the GDP growth is mentioned here. You can quickly go through it. And I have a prelims question for you. Let me read out the question. Which sector contributes the highest to India's GDP? The correct answer for the question is option C, service sector. So with this, we came to the end of the news article discussion. If you like the video, hit like, do comment, and don't forget to subscribe to Shankar IAS Academy YouTube channel. Now, thank you so much for listening.